The AFC is considered the most dominant conference in the NFL right now, and with juggernauts like the Chiefs, Ravens, Bengals, and Bills, it's hard to argue any other way. Despite that though, the AFC South has always been thought of as one of the weakest, until as of recent, with multiple rising stars inside of this division. And in today's video, we're going to go over each team's ceiling and floor, as well as what I fully expect to happen inside of this division, and how possibly 3 teams from this division can make the playoffs. And on top of that as well, how all the quarterbacks in this division are going to be the future of the NFL. This is why the AFC South is the future of the NFL.
They've built this team to win right now with a quarterback who can play at a level with the Joe Burrows, with the Josh Allens, with the Lamar Jacksons, and yes, with the Patrick Mahomes when the time is right.
Stroud, to his credit, feels like the anomaly of the one individual who's 21, 22 years old, who could show up and lead men that are in their 30s, who could lead men that have been in the league forever, who could be a leader of a team and the captain of a team upon arrival coming out of college. That's not the norm.
That he's the type of player that can not only win a Super Bowl in the future, CJ Stroud and them can win a Super Bowl this year.
Now, naturally, I just have to start off with the Houston Texans because it really seems like everything has been going right for them, who just executed maybe the greatest single season turnaround of all time. As we all know, CJ Stroud was everything the Texans could have wished for and more, and enters the 2024 season as a league-leading candidate in the MVP conversation. Then on top of Houston's success last season, they've had one of the best off seasons of any team in football, acquiring Stephon Diggs and Joe Mixon to add 2 more big-name weapons on offense. Nico Autry, Al-Shaair, and Danielle Hunter to bolster down the defense. All of a sudden, Houston is one of the most well-rounded rosters in the NFL, and they're effectively taking advantage of Stroud's rookie contract to build what has the potential to be a superpower in 2024. And when I talk about juggernauts and the intro of this video, the Texans certainly deserve to be inside of that conversation now. And hell, even though it's going to piss some people off, as of right now, I really do think that they might have a better roster than Cincinnati and definitely than the Buffalo Bills. One of the most intriguing things about Houston's roster is their receiver room and how that will shape up with the addition of Diggs. There's no question that Stephon Diggs is a great wideout, but going into his age 31 season, is he still going to be the dominant X receiver that he once was in Minnesota and Buffalo? And as we look into last year, Diggs had under 1,200 yards and 8 touchdowns, which isn't your typical disappointing season, but there's more to it when you look at the game-by-game basis. Through the first 6 weeks, Stephon was truly elite, averaging over 100 yards and nearly 1 touchdown per game, but after that, he completely fell off of a cliff, having less production by every metric through the back 11 games than he did through the first 6. And with that being said, we really don't know what was going on behind the scenes between Diggs and Allen. But he is in Houston now, and I think that he is certainly excited to be working with CJ Stroud in just this explosive offense now. I mean, athletically and technically, he can still be one of the best number 2 wideouts in the game, and I think he'll take on a similar role to D-Hop in Tennessee. I mean, however you want to look at it, Nico Collins at the 1, Diggs at the 2, and Tank Dell at the 3 is probably the best all-around pass catching unit in the league, hands down. And I mean, for all the credit that we do give to CJ Stroud last season because that dude was tremendous, we also have to give some credit to DeMeco Ryans, who also coached this team up just tremendously last year as well. Ryan's focus as a defensive-minded coach is helping Derek Stingley to become one of the brightest young corners in the game, and Will Anderson to live up to the expectations so far in his short time as a pro. Danielle Hunter and Danico Autry are going to make this a premier pass rush group, so don't be surprised when they're in the top 5 unit in sacks. All in all though, this is really just a completely well-rounded roster. It's incredibly rare that a roster has so many young but also proven players, especially with Stroud being so beyond his years as a quarterback. The real question is now though, can he take the next step in 2024 to lead Houston to the Super Bowl? I mean, the championship window is wide open, so it really comes all down to Stroud. Based on what we know now, I think that the absolute ceiling for this Texans team is 14 wins and the 1 seed in the AFC. I mean, they really are that good. As for the floor, I think 10 wins is the minimum barring any crazy injuries to Stroud or other key players, but I mean, even worst case scenario, Houston will still be a playoff team this year. Next, we're going to talk about the Indianapolis Colts, who I believe to be the 2nd best team in this division. And I mean, the consensus on Indy is all over the place though, because it comes down to what your opinion is on Anthony Richardson. Like, I mean, coming into the NFL, this dude really had like no experience playing football. He had like 18 games started or something like that in football from high school and college. college. But then he stepped onto the NFL field and he absolutely excelled at this level. The only problem he did have that was really noticeable, and as we all know, was just the lingering injuries and just constantly getting injured is what I should say. He started just 4 games last year and finished just 2 of them, but when he was on the field, he was absolutely electric. As potentially the greatest pure athlete to play the quarterback we've seen in recent years, Richardson possessed an even bigger threat as a runner than he did as a passer, but the passing game thrived with him under center as well. And now I know the sample size is very, very small from what we've seen from Richardson, even including this year's preseason, but it could mean big things for the future of the Colts. The big question going forward, though, is if Richardson's playstyle is sustainable. And don't get me wrong, he's definitely gonna have to tone down taking hits when he goes on like scrambles and can slide. But I mean, you don't want to take away what this kid can do in the run game because he is a freak of nature and needs to be used for what he's good at. Aside from AR, though, the Colts have a pretty solid roster overall. In the draft, they selected Latu in the first round. And sorry if I did pronounce that name wrong. I do know that his first name is a little bit tough to pronounce, but he was one of the most explosive pass rushers in all of football and should be able to make a huge impact alongside DeForest Buckner this season. They also added AD Mitchell, whose size and physicality will help bolster up the receiver room that already includes Michael Pittman Jr. and Josh Downs. The concerning position group for the Colts is at the corner spot, where Indy is lining up 2 second-year DBs on the outside in Jalen Jones and Juju Brents. The Colts gave up the 10th most points per game last year with 23.3 on average and allowed 3,800 passing yards and 21 touchdowns. Kenny Moore leads the unit, but the inexperience around him could be a major issue. They're also going to be starting third-year pro Nick Cross at strong safety over Rodney Thomas, who started 15 games at the position last season. It honestly seems like they've kind of gotten worse at what was already one of their worst positions going into this offseason, and weaknesses in the secondary can be easily exploited by opposing offenses. But overall, I mean, this team is super young, and I think that makes it just a really extremely volatile season that they could have this year. On one hand, if Anthony Richardson plays extremely well and lives up to that freak of nature, just kind of what we all think about him, then they could win a lot of games. But if he ends up becoming, just the inexperienced quarterback because of only playing like 18 football games, then they're not going to be that successful. I really think that we could be looking at a 12-win ceiling for the Colts. Now, as I said, though, this really could go badly also, and I think Indy could end up being a 7-win team. Personally, I believe that they will end up being closer to their total from last season, either like 9 or 10 wins in 2024, and they might be able to grab a wild card spot with the Texans taking the division. Now, next up, though, we're going to talk about the Jacksonville Jaguars, who are somewhat of an atypical team in the NFL right now. Normally, when a team locks up their franchise quarterback for the foreseeable future, it means they've had a good amount of success with the quarterback running the team. That's not the case for the Jags and Trevor Lawrence, who has a career quarterback record of 20 and 30 through his first 3 NFL seasons. He did lead the Jaguars to a playoff win over the Los Angeles Chargers in the 2022 season, but ultimately fell short a week later in the division round against the Chiefs. But don't get me wrong, he's not really like a terrible or bad quarterback by any means. It's just that I don't really know if he's worth the 5-year, $275 million contract he just signed. To put things into perspective, his career stats are eerily similar to Daniel Jones. Yes, Daniel Jones of all people. And I mean, I don't think any other team would give a starting job right now, much less $200 million. The Jags also lost 2 of their leading wideouts in 2023 in Calvin Ridley and Zay Jones, who they did replace with rookie first-rounder Brian Thomas Jr. and Gabe Davis. Travis Etienne and Evan Ingram project to be the highest volume weapons in this offense, with Ingram potentially leading this team in reception and targets as a tight end. The defense is highlighted by Josh Hines-Allen at edge, their biggest free agent pickup in Eric Armstead at defensive tackle, and Trayvon Walker, who still has a lot left to prove at the other edge spot. The back end of the defense is decent, but nothing special, with Andre Sisco and Darnell Savage at strong safety and free safety respectively, and a combination of Tyson Campbell and Rondell Darby at corner. I mean, their roster feels a lot more certain than the Colts, and thus I'd say it has a lower ceiling at 10 wins. Even if Brian Thomas becomes a great receiver in year 1, I still don't think the team has enough top-end talent on either side of the ball to warrant more than 10 wins this season, but they could certainly be set up for great success in the near future. If everything goes wrong for the Jags, however, I couldn't really see them falling lower than 7 wins either. While their floor is probably about the same as Indianapolis, the Colts have a lot more potential to be a contender this year. Which now brings me to my final team I want to talk about, and what I believe is the worst team in this division, in the Tennessee Titans. And now, before I explain why the Titans are the worst team in the division, I do want to point out some of the positive acquisitions they made this season, which included poaching Calvin Ridley from the Jaguars, bringing in Tony Pollard to man up the backfield with Tajay Spears, and Lloyd Cushenberry to lock up the center spot with the departure of Aaron Brewer. On defense, Tennessee brought in L'Jarius Sneed, who is undoubtedly a top 5 cornerback in football when healthy, safety in Chido Inawuzie, who showed CB1 potential before an injury sidetracked his 2022 and 23 seasons. They also drafted JC Latham, who should finally seal up the left tackle spot that's been bothering Titans quarterbacks so much since Taylor Lewan's injury in 2019, and Tavondre Sweat, whose 6'4", 335-pound frame will plug in the middle of the defense as a traditional nose tackle. And you might be thinking, wow, that's a lot of great additions that this team has made, so what makes them like possibly the worst team in this division, I think. And for starters, I mean, you're not wrong. That was a lot of great acquisitions that they did make this offseason, but I think the biggest thing or the biggest factors that are going to make them struggle this year is they have an unproven quarterback and an unproven head coach that honestly, I don't really believe in either one of them. Will Levis was 3-6 as a starter last year, and while he possesses all the tools to make an elite NFL quarterback, he wasn't quite able to put it all together last year. He seemed over-aggressive at times, and his footwork and pocket presence have a lot of room for improvement, not to mention he needs to learn how to not take monstrous hits every game. Overall, Levis just isn't comfortable yet in an NFL offense, which is completely okay, and the hope is that he'll become much more comfortable this season, but he might not be leading his team to a division title. The other weak point I just mentioned was Brian Callahan, and while I do think eventually he may become a great head coach, this year, I just don't know if he has the talent and team around him, and on top of that, he's got a lot left to prove for himself. One of those things he still needs to do is call plays, something that he didn't get experience doing in Cincinnati and hasn't done yet in his career. I mean, I really like the scheme he's going to bring over from the Bengals, and it should fit really well with the Titans personnel, but he's probably going to have to take some time to get used to his new responsibilities. With that being said, I think the Titans have a ceiling of 10 wins also, considering they actually do have a good amount of high-end talent. However, their depth up front on both sides of the ball and at middle linebacker is severely lacking. And if Levis still doesn't get the hang of things while switching to an entirely new offense in year 2, it could be more of the same, which is why I believe the floor in 2024 is 6 wins, the same total that they had in 2023. But I want to know what you guys think. I mean, honestly, all 4 of these teams do have a lot of talent inside of the AFC South. Personally, for me, though, I just think the Texans are just far and above just the best team in this division and a top 5 team in the AFC just conference. I really do think Stroud is going to take those steps into becoming a franchise quarterback. I mean, he already is pretty much, but I think all these sophomore slump things that we're hearing or people are thinking, I don't think it's going to come true. I think the dude is a for real threat in the NFL and is going to be good. So if you guys have any record predictions, throw them down in the comments section. Who is going to win the division? Who's going to make the playoffs? Honestly, a lot of people are high on the Titans. I don't know why, but again, if you guys do enjoy the content, make sure you guys like, comment, and subscribe. Share it with somebody that loves the AFC South or just loves football in general. We are like 10 or 11 days away from it, and I am hyped. We are doing big things. If you guys want to join a fantasy football league, join my Discord. We are going to be doing a draft later this week. Maybe not even this week, maybe over the weekend. And as always, I will catch you guys in the next one.